Former First Lady Michelle Obama has a message for Americans ahead of this year's midterm elections. We've got to vote like the future of our democracy depends on it. That is what she's saying in a letter titled Fight for Our Vote. This was published as an ad in the New York Times. Mrs. Obama and her voting rights organization, When We All Vote, called on Americans to continue engaging in democracy amid a historic attack on voting rights. And joining us now to talk about this is Bakari Sellers, CNN political commentator, and also, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, an author, but an author of a new children's book, Who Are Your People? It's a delightful book. We'll talk about that, as I said, in a moment. Okay, but Bakari, I mean, bringing in the big guns here, Michelle Obama, what does this signify to you?
Well, it's necessary, and one of the things that Democrats are trying to figure out, and most people who or find themselves on the side of democracy, is how they're going to overcome some of the obstruction that we have in our own party from Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and how we're going to make progress when you don't have any changes, when you don't have any adaptations to the voting rights law. And so one of the things that the former First Lady says, which many people are saying, is it takes action. And that action means that we have to register voters. And what I want people to understand is that we're not just talking about registering voters in New York, Massachusetts, and California, but we need to go to Mississippi. We need to go to Jackson, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Albany, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, throughout the South. Make sure that you're registering millions of voters or hundreds of thousands of voters, and that can change the dynamic and overcome any laws that are regressive.
Is this less about the who is asking for Bakari and more about the what she is asking for here? Because this is all about what is actually being produced here. It only matters if people are being registered.
No, I can't necessarily agree with you, because anytime Michelle Obama speaks, it's the who. And the reason being is because she doesn't speak often. The individuals in our party who have that level of gravitas, not just, I mean, listen, this cuts across party lines. When Barack Obama and Michelle Obama speak, especially after the last 4 years of Donald Trump and kind of the malaise that we're in now with the resurgence of the virus, inflation, et cetera, then Barack Obama and Michelle Obama cut through that, and we all know that Michelle Obama is the most popular Obama anyway. And so in this case, it's about the who, but the what is also very powerful, because we're talking about an action item, and we're talking about something that everybody can do, which is get out and register voters.
A giant test for President Biden this week as he visits Georgia with the goal of reinvigorating the Democratic push for voting rights. Senior White House advisor Cedric Richmond frames the Tuesday Georgia visit this way, quote, doubling down, kicking it into another gear. We are going right to the belly of the beast, Richmond says, or ground zero for voter suppression, voter subversion, and obstruction. 2 Democratic voting bills are currently stalled in the Senate. The majority leader, Chuck Schumer, says if Republicans continue to block them, he will try to change the Senate rules. But at least 2 Democrats oppose such a change. And there is now enormous pressure on President Biden to somehow resolve this Democratic family divide. The panel is back with me. Nia Malika Henderson, I want to start with you. To the point, the pressure on the president is that several civil rights activists down in Georgia, the state where he's going, essentially said, Mr. President, please don't come unless you have a deal. I want to read from their letter. As civil rights leaders and advocates, we reject any visit by President Biden that does not include an announcement of a finalized voting rights plan that will pass both chambers. The president doesn't have such a plan.
No, he doesn't. This appears to be yet another speech. The president gave a speech in June on voting rights. He gave a speech in July as well on voting rights, and nothing much has changed in terms of what Joe Manchin, in terms of what Kyrsten Sinema would actually do in terms of a carve-out for voting rights around the filibuster. So this could be deja vu all over again for this president. He's essentially bringing a speech to what is a knife fight, and you've seen this all across the country in states like Texas, states like Georgia, where Republicans have been very successful in rewriting the voting rules in their states to make it more difficult to vote and also make it where the state can actually overturn the will of the people and wrest control of the counting from different counties. So, you know, this is going to be a speech. It's going to be much watched, but I think it's going to leave a lot of civil rights advocates as well as progressives very disheartened about the future in terms of voting rights in this country.
This effort and the president getting some help. Jackie Kucinich yesterday in the New York Times at the top of the show, I called her the most popular Democrat on the planet. That would be the former First Lady, Michelle Obama. A full-page ad with a letter fighting for our vote. But if you look at the specifics there, recruit and train volunteers throughout 2022, register more than 1 million new voters, organize, they do organize 100,000 Americans to lobby Congress essentially to push for it, but recruit lawyers. Commit to educate voters. That last part, commit to educate voters on how to vote safely in their states. Part of this is, yes, push for the legislation, but part of it also seems, if we fail, let's make sure at least we educate Democrats about the changes in their states.
Well, right, because there is a sense of reality that it is unlikely that they're going to be able to have a legislative change in the near future because of the resistance to changing the filibuster and because there aren't enough Democrats to get it through to break that filibuster. So this is kind of the next best thing, but there has been some dissatisfaction even before this among voting rights advocates, saying that the Biden administration up until this point hasn't pushed hard enough, hasn't taken this as seriously as, say, they have Build Back Better or even the infrastructure bill that did pass both houses of Congress. So the fact that they're kicking it into gear now, I think is giving some hope. But there is an acknowledgement, particularly you saw that for the former First Lady, that this is going to be an uphill climb and they're going to have to figure out other ways to make progress.
So, Melanie, Chuck Schumer has to bring this to the floor. He has to try to change the rules because the Democratic base demands it. And Nia Malika just well described the views of the civil rights leaders who think it hasn't been enough so far, and they're very frustrated. But what happens? What happens if Manchin and Sinema and maybe one or two others don't change their mind? Is there a plan B or a plan C or D, in the sense that you do hear many academics and some Republicans even open to the idea of, let's fix the Electoral College Act, let's do a couple of other more modest things. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, these votes are going to fail. They're just not the votes right now to pass these reforms without Republicans, and there's just not the votes among Democrats to change the rules. So it is going to fail. I think once that happens, we could potentially see some movement on a compromise over a much more modest reform. For example, the Electoral Count Act, reforming that really outlines the process by which Congress uses to certify the state's electoral votes. Top Republicans have left the door open to that. They're really nervous about this effort to potentially change the filibuster. So I think that's why you're seeing them warm up. Democrats have ruled that out so far because they don't want to undermine their effort to get something larger. But I think once they see there is no other options, we could potentially see them come together on something much more modest like that.